Deathloop is the latest game from the developers at Arcane Studios, and with the publisher Bethesda being purchased by Microsoft last year, there is a legitimate possibility that this could be the last Bethesda game that I get a chance to play on a PlayStation console. Deathloop was one of the premier games that was shown during the official reveal of the PlayStation 5, and to me it really stood out with an interesting premise. But now that I've completed the game, while I will admit that at times Deathloop can certainly be an enjoyable title, I personally think that it is lacking in a number of serious departments that holds it back from being a truly great game. The primary story is set during the 1960s as you take on the role of Colt, who is an assassin who wakes up on a beach after experiencing what he believed to be a dream of him being killed by a woman he doesn't know. As he begins to explore his surroundings, he starts seeing messages from alternate versions of himself, guiding him to a bunker. He then discovers that he is trapped within a time loop, and in order to escape, he must hunt down and kill 8 specific targets known as visionaries within the course of a single day before the time loop restarts, and he must start all over again. This will prove to be much harder than it sounds, as one of his targets is the head of security Juliana, and she is dedicated into protecting the loop by killing Colt however many times it takes, while warning the other visionaries and their followers that Colt is after them. Now, while Deathloop's main campaign provides an interesting concept, I personally did not feel that it did a good enough job of actually explaining how everything worked. Over the course of the game, the only information that you will be given comes directly from Juliana herself, as she and Colt will have multiple conversations discussing either things that Colt has done or things that he is going to do in order to understand exactly how the loop was started or how it works. And in order to actually get a more in-depth understanding of how things are operating, you actually have to read reports that are located on computers that you will have to look through throughout the course of the game. The story also got really confusing for me with the appearance of other versions of Colt that will just show up and say a quick line before disappearing. However, there is one serious disappointing element about this game's plot that, unfortunately, this is a spoiler. So if you don't want to hear it, I would suggest that you jump to this time spot here. Now, at some point later on in the game, it is revealed that Juliana is in fact Colt's daughter, but the plot never does anything with this. You two are still committed to killing each other. There was a real opportunity to make the story become much more personal, but this revelation changes nothing. They could have made Juliana his wife, sister, or even best friend, and you would get the same outcome. So I ask, why did the writers even bother going with this story element? And by the end, once you've killed off the other target, Juliana tries to convince you to not break the loop, but never gives you a real good reason as for why you shouldn't. And this leads to 3 possible endings, 2 of which of these endings involve Colt deciding not to break the loop, going against the very purpose of the game itself. Now, though this game doesn't have many actual cinematic cutscenes, but the radio interactions between Colt and Juliana really provide the most amount of entertainment, as it is a pure joy to hear Colt and Juliana trash chuck each other going back and forth. And it's really these connections between these two that is the real strength of Deathloop's story, because learning about their shared history and how the majority of decisions in Colt's past set up the events that are happening now is one thing that really stands out about Deathloop's story. I just wish that this game did a much better job of actually doing one with the other visionary targets. The most you will get out of them is a quick little cutscene discussing them before moving on to the next objective. The gameplay style for Deathloop could be described as an exploration first-person shooter that will have you explore 4 different districts across 4 different times in a single day, which are morning, noon, afternoon, and evening. Now, the maps themselves are solid size, with all of them making slight changes depending on the time of day that you are exploring them. Now, because 7 of your 8 targets are active in different areas at different times, it may seem pretty difficult to take them all down in one loop. So how will you do this? You will do this by completing objectives which will allow you to learn about each of your targets, and then using the information that you gain, you can then manipulate their movements and cause multiple targets to appear in one specific district at a specific time so you can kill them all at once. Exploration and combat are pretty standard overall. As your playthrough, you will encounter 2 different types of NPCs, Visionaries and Eternalists, that serve them. Now, Eternalists are pretty easy to take down, but the Visionaries are a bit tougher to take down, and they usually hold themselves up in a specific location on the map. Over the course of the game, there is a wide variety of different weapons that you can collect, along with powers that you can gain, which are called slabs. Your weapons can range from pistols, revolvers, shotguns, rifles, and all of these weapons can be equipped with little perks called trinkets that you can collect from killing enemies. Slabs, on the other hand, can only be recovered when you've killed a main target, and these slabs each have different functions that can help you either combatively or help you explore the map much easier. Just like your main firearms, your slabs can also be equipped with upgrades that will only be able to be collected from killing main targets, and since all the visionaries respawn after the loop restarts, you can kill them over and over again in order to collect different upgrades. Now, Juliana is an interesting case because she can appear at any time to hunt you down. She does this by setting up a signal jammer that will prevent you from leaving the district that you are currently exploring, and this will require you to either have to deal with her first, then disable the signal jammer before you will be allowed to leave the area. But as long as you have the right weapon or equipment or power, she can be taken down just as easy as the other visionary targets that you will encounter. Now, when the time loop resets itself, you will lose all of your weapons, slabs, and trinkets that you have collected, but in order to save them so they carry over into the next loop, you will have to collect what is called residium, which you can then gain from either random items that you will find in the area or from killing enemies. And then you can use your residium like currency to infuse specific weapons, slabs, or trinkets. That way they will become permanently yours for the rest of the game. Now, this infuse mechanic also leads into another game mechanic that I have mixed feelings about, because it is the fact that during any specific trip to any of the districts, you actually have to die 3 times before the time loop will reset itself. Now, while this may sound like a good idea, this way you don't lose any of the stuff that you've collected if you accidentally die, it seriously takes the risk factor out. Now, if you compare this to something like Returnal, in that game, unless you use a certain device, you will lose everything. But here, you have to die 3 times, and if you do die, you will just respawn near the same area, which will allow you to recover all the residuum that you've collected, thereby removing the risk factor. The threat level coming from the NPCs was so minimum over the course of the game that things to me just felt way too easy, and because of how the time loop works, enemies will respawn in the exact same locations every single time. So once you've gone through a few loops, it just becomes a game of rinse and repeat until the game's over. The reason I believe that the time loop element worked much better in something like Returnal was because you never knew what to expect as you explored the map, so it kept you constantly on your toes. But in Deathloop, that risk factor has been completely removed, and once you've played this game for a couple of hours, you'll be able to navigate through each district at any time of the day with absolutely no problems. Now, once you've completed the game, you can try out the alternate gameplay mode, which will allow you to take on the role of Juliana and jump into another player's campaign and kill them online. Now, I personally wasn't really a big fan of this mode because I feel that it was just added in order to make the main campaign more challenging for some players, because the developers knew that fighting against regular NPCs would provide absolutely no challenge at all to the player. Now, you can turn this online function on or off, but this is not something that I would have wanted to experience during my playthrough of the main campaign or had any interest of actually testing out against another player online. When it comes to Deathloop's game design departments, visually, this was a very nice looking game that has a great amount of detail added to each section of the maps depending on the time of day that you were exploring them. I really enjoyed the whole 60s look, as it really was helped by a solid soundtrack that helps add to whatever the environment you were in or exploring or actions that you were taking part in. The game ran extremely smooth on my PlayStation 5, and at times, the load times were actually pretty fast. I really appreciate how Deathloop took advantage of the functions of the PlayStation 5 DualSense controller by actually having the triggers jam if your weapons experience a jam, or having the weapons feel very different from each other. It was also a welcome addition to have the speaker on your controller act as a kind of radio with all of its functions, adding a level of immersion that was introduced in the previous generation of gaming, but is quickly becoming a staple function for this current generation of gaming. Overall, despite Deathloop's flaws in terms of story and gameplay execution in some departments, it was still a solid experience from beginning to end that I really did have some fun at times with. Now, in conclusion, everyone is entitled to their own opinion, and I'm not exactly sure in depth with all those reviewers that gave Deathloop such glowing reviews saw in this game, but I can tell you right off the bat, there is absolutely no way in hell that Deathloop is a 10 out of 10 game that I see myself going back and playing a second time. Overall, its execution of the time loop element made the game far too easy. The AI is brain dead at times. The story, while good in some elements, is not really fleshed out in terms of certain cast members that I think really would have given this game a lot more depth. And overall, I think that by the end, I was just kind of bored of it. Not in a bad way, but just kind of a passive way in terms of just me wanting to beat the game as quickly as possible so I can get this review up. But even though it's been a little while. So overall, if I had to give Deathloop a rating, the highest respectable rating that I could give this game is a 7.5 out of 10. I think if they had added a few more elements, maybe added some more customizations and a few more elements to the alternative gameplay mode, I might have pushed this up to an 8. But I think a 7.5 is a good spot to give it for this particular game in my experience. So that is my thoughts on Deathloop. Now, if you did have to play this game and enjoyed it a lot more than I did, I would love to hear your explanation in the comment down below. And if you like my review, please do not forget to like, share, and subscribe to keep track of me on all my future videos, as well as to help grow the channel. And like always, thank you guys for watching. You're awesome, and I will catch you all next time.